Everyone laughed at the poor single mom in the restaurant, until the Mafia Boss reserved every table for her. Hello, everyone. I hope you're having a wonderful day, staying safe, and finding a little extra luck wherever life takes you. Before we begin today's unforgettable story, may I borrow just 5 seconds of your good fortune? Please support this channel by subscribing and turning on notifications so you never miss another emotional journey filled with heart and hope. Thank you so much for your kindness, your encouragement, and for choosing to spend your time here with me. I truly appreciate every single one of you. Now I would love to hear from you before our story begins. Where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it there right now? With that said, let us begin this unforgettable story together. The deepest wounds are often made by laughter that was never meant to be kind. For 3 months, I had quietly placed $5 at a time into an old glass jar hidden above the kitchen cabinet. Every skipped cup of coffee, every extra shift cleaning offices after work, every small sacrifice had one purpose. My 8-year-old son, Ethan, had asked for only one thing on his birthday. "Mom," he had whispered with hopeful eyes, "can we eat at a real restaurant this year?" I promised him we would. That promise carried me through every exhausting day until finally, on a cool Saturday evening, we stood together outside Brighton House, one of the nicest family restaurants downtown. Ethan wore the blue button-up shirt I had carefully ironed that morning. It had belonged to his late father years before, altered just enough to fit my growing little boy. I wore a simple cream-colored sweater and faded jeans that had seen better days, but Ethan smiled at me as though I looked beautiful. "Ready?" I asked. He nodded eagerly. "This is going to be the best birthday ever." The hostess welcomed us with a pleasant smile and led us to a small table near the window. Candles flickered softly across the dining room, while quiet piano music floated through the air. Ethan opened the menu with wide eyes. "Mom, they even have chocolate cake." I laughed softly. Then I think someone deserves chocolate cake today. Before we could order, laughter erupted from a nearby table where 6 elegantly dressed guests sat celebrating with expensive bottles of wine. At first, I ignored them. Then I heard one woman speak loudly enough for half the dining room to hear. "Some people really have no shame. They save for months just to pretend they belong somewhere for one night." Another man chuckled. "Look at the kid staring at the menu. He probably thinks everything comes with free refills." Their table burst into laughter again. I felt my cheeks grow warm, but I kept my eyes on Ethan. He pretended not to hear them. Children always pretend before they begin believing. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "Order whatever makes you happy." He smiled bravely. "I only want a cheeseburger." The waitress returned with an apologetic expression before she could write anything down. "I am very sorry, ma'am." She glanced nervously toward the larger party. "The manager would like to speak with you." Moments later, the restaurant manager approached with a practiced smile that never reached his eyes. "Ms. Parker," he began politely after checking the reservation list, "there's been a small complication." "Is something wrong?" I asked. He cleared his throat. "Some of our preferred guests have requested additional seating. We were wondering if you would mind giving up this table." I stared at him in disbelief. "But I made this reservation 2 weeks ago." "Yes," he admitted quietly, "and we appreciate that. We would be happy to refund your reservation fee." Ethan looked from the manager to me without saying a word. I recognized that expression immediately. It was the look of a little boy trying very hard not to cry in public. I slowly stood and gathered my purse before forcing a gentle smile for my son's sake. "It is all right," I whispered. "We will celebrate somewhere else." Ethan nodded, but I noticed how carefully he closed the menu before placing it back on the table, as though he did not want anyone to know how excited he had been just moments earlier. We had barely reached the restaurant entrance when the deep sound of several black luxury sport utility vehicles rolled to a stop outside, and every conversation inside the dining room suddenly fell silent. Some people never realize that a child remembers every moment an adult wishes he could forget. The restaurant doors had barely closed behind Ethan and me when the cool evening air brushed against my face. I tightened my grip on his small hand and forced myself to smile. "How about pizza instead?" I asked softly. "Or maybe we can make pancakes at home with extra chocolate chips." Ethan looked up at me with those gentle blue eyes that always seemed older than his 8 years. He smiled, but it was the kind of smile children wear when they're trying to protect their parents. That sounds fun, Mom. Before I could answer, the deep rumble of expensive engines filled the quiet street. 4 black luxury sport utility vehicles stopped neatly in front of Brighton House. The restaurant valet immediately hurried forward while several employees straightened their uniforms as though preparing for someone very important. One by one, men dressed in perfectly tailored dark suits stepped onto the sidewalk. They spoke quietly into discreet earpieces before opening the rear passenger door of the center vehicle. Then he stepped out. He was tall, composed, and carried himself with effortless confidence. A charcoal overcoat rested across broad shoulders, and the collar of his crisp white shirt revealed the edge of intricate tattoos climbing along his neck. There was nothing loud about him. He did not demand attention. The entire street simply seemed to pause the moment he arrived. Ethan leaned closer to me and whispered, "Mom, is he famous?" I smiled faintly. "I do not know, sweetheart." The man glanced toward the restaurant entrance before his attention shifted unexpectedly toward us. His eyes settled first on Ethan's birthday balloon, then on the small gift bag I carried, and finally on the untouched birthday cake box the waitress had quietly handed me before we left. He noticed everything without asking a single question. Just as he began walking toward the entrance, laughter echoed once again from inside the restaurant. The same group of well-dressed guests had gathered near the windows. One man lifted his wine glass and spoke loudly enough for people outside to hear. "Looks like they finally found a place more suited to their budget." Several people laughed again. I lowered my head. I refused to let Ethan see the tears gathering in my eyes. Suddenly, calm footsteps stopped only a few feet away. "Excuse me." I looked up. The stranger stood before us, his expression unreadable yet surprisingly gentle. "May I ask your son's name?" I hesitated before answering. "Ethan." He lowered himself slightly so he could speak at eye level with my son instead of towering above him. "Happy birthday, Ethan." My little boy blinked in surprise. "Thank you, sir. Did you enjoy your dinner?" Ethan glanced at me before quietly admitting, "We did not get to eat." The man's eyes lifted toward me. He did not ask why. He simply noticed the answer already written across my face. "I understand," he said softly. Before I could respond, the restaurant manager rushed outside wearing his brightest professional smile. "Mr. Bennett, welcome back. Your private dining room is ready." So his name was Lucas Bennett. The manager barely acknowledged Ethan and me before turning his full attention toward the distinguished guest. Lucas did not move. Instead, he looked calmly at the manager and asked a single question. "Were these 2 guests asked to leave your restaurant?" The manager hesitated. There was a seating adjustment. Lucas glanced briefly toward the laughing table inside before returning his attention to the manager. His voice remained perfectly calm, almost conversational. "I see." He reached into the inside pocket of his coat and handed a simple black business card to the assistant standing beside him. "Please call our legal office," he said quietly. "Then reserve every available table in this restaurant for the rest of the evening. I would like the reservation completed before anyone orders another course." True power does not raise its voice. It quietly changes the rules that allowed injustice to exist in the first place. The restaurant manager froze as though he had misunderstood what he had just heard. "Mr. Bennett," he said. Carefully, "Did you mean the private dining room?" Lucas looked at him with calm certainty. "No, every available table." The assistant had already stepped a few feet away, speaking quietly into his phone. Less than a minute later, another member of Lucas's team entered the restaurant carrying a slim leather portfolio. Papers were signed with remarkable efficiency, while the manager's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief. I stood beside Ethan without saying a word. None of this made sense to me. I had spent years believing people with influence only protected people who already had it. Yet the stranger in front of me had not asked who I was, what I did for a living, or whether I could ever repay his kindness. He had simply noticed that a little boy's birthday had been taken away. The group of wealthy guests continued laughing among themselves until the manager approached their table with visible hesitation. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began politely, "I sincerely apologize, but beginning immediately, every table in the restaurant has been reserved for a private event." One woman frowned. "We are already dining." "Yes, ma'am," the manager answered respectfully. "Your meals will be completed, compliments of the house. However, we will be unable to serve additional courses or accommodate extended seating after this service concludes." The man who had mocked Ethan leaned back in his chair with an irritated smile. "Do you know who we are?" Before the manager could answer, Lucas calmly stepped inside the dining room. Every conversation stopped. He did not raise his voice. He simply spoke with quiet confidence. "The staff knows exactly who you are. Tonight, they also know how every guest deserves to be treated." Nobody answered him. The silence carried more weight than any argument could have. Lucas turned toward the manager. "Please make certain every employee receives overtime pay for staying late. No one should lose income because of my reservation." "Of course, Mr. Bennett." Then Lucas looked toward me again. "Ms. Parker." I hesitated. "Yes. Would you and Ethan allow me to correct what should never have happened?" I immediately shook my head. "You have already done more than enough." He smiled faintly. "Respectfully, I disagree." Ethan tugged gently on my sleeve. "Mom," he whispered, "I think he's trying to give me my birthday back." My heart tightened. Lucas heard the words, but pretended he had not. Instead, he walked to the hostess stand and quietly spoke with the young hostess who had welcomed us earlier. She returned a moment later, carrying the same birthday reservation card I had filled out 2 weeks before. My name remained written neatly across the top beside Ethan's birthday. Lucas accepted the card, brushed an invisible speck of dust from its corner, and handed it back to me with both hands. "A reservation," he said softly, "should be honored." The hostess smiled warmly. "Your window table has been prepared again, Ms. Parker." I looked toward the dining room. Fresh candles had been lit. Clean place settings waited exactly where Ethan and I had first been seated. Even the small birthday balloon had been carefully returned beside the chair he had chosen earlier. Lucas remained several steps away, giving us space instead of attention. "Please enjoy your evening," he said. "This celebration belongs to your son." As Ethan slowly smiled for the first time since entering the restaurant, I realized the most extraordinary thing Lucas Bennett had reserved that night was not every table in the building. It was the simple dignity that no child should ever have to lose on his birthday. Sometimes the most unforgettable meal has nothing to do with the food. It is about the moment someone reminds you that your dignity still matters. I stood motionless for several seconds, unable to believe the same restaurant that had quietly asked Ethan and me to leave only minutes earlier was now welcoming us back with genuine respect. The hostess carefully pulled out Ethan's chair before placing the birthday balloon beside him exactly where it had been before. "Happy birthday," she said warmly. My son smiled so brightly that the hurt in his eyes finally began to disappear. "Thank you," he answered. As we settled into our seats, I noticed that every other table in the dining room had gradually become empty. Some guests had already left after finishing their meals, while others quietly accepted the complimentary desserts and bills the restaurant provided before politely departing. No one argued. No one complained loudly. The atmosphere had completely changed. The laughter that had embarrassed us earlier had been replaced by calm conversation and quiet reflection. Lucas did not join our table. Instead, he chose a seat several rows away near the far window, allowing enough distance for Ethan and me to celebrate without feeling obligated to entertain him. His assistants remained nearby, but never interrupted the peaceful evening. It was as though he understood that true generosity should never become a performance. The waitress approached carrying 2 menus with an entirely different expression from before. "Ms. Parker," she said sincerely, "I am very sorry for how tonight began. Please allow us to make Ethan's birthday as special as it should have been." I smiled gently. "Thank you. That means more than you know." Ethan studied the menu again, but this time his excitement had returned. "Mom," he whispered, "can I still get the cheeseburger?" I laughed softly. "You absolutely can." He looked toward the dessert section before lowering his voice. And maybe the chocolate cake. Definitely the chocolate cake. While we waited for dinner, Ethan quietly colored on the children's activity sheet the waitress had brought. Every few minutes, I caught him glancing toward Lucas with curious admiration. Finally, he leaned closer to me. Mom, why did he help us? I looked across the dining room, where Lucas calmly read a document while occasionally sipping sparkling water. I honestly do not know. Ethan thought carefully before answering. Maybe he did not like seeing people be mean. Children often discover the simplest truth before adults do. A few minutes later, our meals arrived, beautifully prepared. The aroma of freshly baked bread, grilled vegetables, and Ethan's cheeseburger filled the air. My son took one bite before closing his eyes dramatically. This is the best birthday dinner ever. His happiness warmed every corner of my heart. Just as we finished our meal, the lights threw out. The dining room dimmed slightly. I looked around in confusion until several employees emerged from the kitchen carrying a small chocolate birthday cake decorated with blue frosting and 8 glowing candles. They began singing softly while Ethan covered his face in delighted surprise. Mom, he whispered excitedly. They remembered. I knew immediately who had made sure they did. Ethan made one quiet birthday wish before blowing out every candle in a single breath. Applause filled the restaurant, not loud or overwhelming, but warm enough to make a little boy feel truly celebrated. As the employees returned to the kitchen, Lucas rose from his table and slowly walked toward us. He stopped at a respectful distance, careful not to interrupt the moment. Happy birthday, Ethan, he said with a gentle smile. I hope this evening became a little closer to what your mother promised you. Ethan climbed down from his chair and held up the first slice of birthday cake with both hands. Would you like to share with us? For the first time that evening, I saw the composed man with the tattooed neck pause, as though no business success had ever meant as much as the simple invitation offered by an 8-year-old boy. The greatest gift a stranger can offer is not money. It is making someone feel invisible no longer. Lucas looked at the slice of birthday cake Ethan held toward him and smiled with genuine surprise. Are you sure? He asked gently. Ethan nodded without hesitation. Birthdays are better when people share them. For a brief moment, the powerful man standing before us seemed almost speechless. He accepted the small dessert plate with both hands as though it were something priceless instead of an ordinary piece of chocolate cake. Thank you, he said quietly. I will remember this birthday. Rather than sitting beside us, Lucas pulled out a chair at the neighboring table, leaving enough space for Ethan and me to enjoy our evening without feeling uncomfortable. That simple gesture told me more about his character than any expensive suit or luxury vehicle ever could. He understood respect. Ethan happily continued telling stories between bites of cake. He described his favorite science project, the model airplane he wanted to build one day, and how he hoped to become an engineer because engineers make things that help people. Lucas listened with complete attention, never checking his phone, never interrupting, never pretending to listen while thinking about something else. That sounds like an excellent dream, Lucas said warmly. The world always needs more people who want to build instead of destroy. Ethan smiled proudly. Mom says helping people is more important than being rich. Lucas glanced toward me before answering. Your mother is a very wise woman. My cheeks warmed slightly. He repeats everything I say. Ethan laughed. Not everything. The quiet conversation felt strangely natural, as though we had known one another much longer than a single evening. When dinner ended, I reached for my purse. Please allow me to pay the bill. Before the waitress could answer, Lucas spoke calmly. Your reservation was honored tonight. Your bill should be honored as well. I looked at him with quiet determination. I appreciate everything you have done, but this dinner was a promise I made to my son. I would like to keep that promise myself. For the first time that evening, I saw a genuine admiration appear in his eyes. He gave a small nod. Then I will not take that away from you. The waitress smiled before placing the check gently in front of me. I paid with the carefully saved money that had taken months to collect, and somehow the receipt felt more meaningful now than it would have before. I had not accepted charity. I had been given back the opportunity to fulfill my promise with dignity. As we prepared to leave, the restaurant manager approached once more. His expression no longer carried the polished confidence from earlier. Instead, it reflected sincere regret. "Ms. Parker," he said quietly, "I owe you an apology. I allowed appearances to influence my judgment. That should never have happened in this restaurant." I studied him for a moment before answering. "I hope the next family who walks through these doors never has to wonder whether they belong." He lowered his head. "They will not." Lucas said nothing. He simply watched the exchange with calm approval, allowing the apology to remain genuine instead of becoming another performance. Outside, the evening air felt lighter than before. Ethan held his birthday balloon in one hand and the small box containing the leftover cake in the other. Before climbing into our aging car, he turned toward Lucas. "Thank you for helping my mom." Lucas smiled softly. "She did the hardest part herself." Ethan thought for a second before asking the question only a child would ask. "Can we be friends?" Lucas's expression softened in a way I had not seen all evening. He glanced at me first, waiting for my silent approval. I offered the smallest nod. Only then did he answer. "I would like that very much." As we drove away beneath the glow of the streetlights, I looked once in the rearview mirror. Lucas remained standing outside the restaurant, hands in the pockets of his overcoat, watching our old car disappear into the night. He did not wave. He did not follow. But somehow, I had the unmistakable feeling that this birthday dinner was not the end of our story. It was only the moment our lives had quietly begun to change together. The people who deserve your trust are rarely the ones who ask for it. They are the ones who patiently earn it one quiet moment at a time. Nearly 3 weeks passed after Ethan's birthday before I saw Lucas again. He never appeared unexpectedly outside my apartment. He never sent extravagant gifts or tried to impress me with expensive gestures. Instead, life simply continued. I worked long hours at the neighborhood bookstore where I had been employed for the past 4 years. And every afternoon, I picked Ethan up from school before we walked home together beneath rows of maple trees that were slowly beginning to lose their leaves. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang. The caller identification displayed an unfamiliar number. "Ms. Parker?" a warm female voice asked. "My name is Olivia. I work with the Bennett Foundation. Mr. Bennett recently donated books and science equipment to the Children's Library at Riverside Community Center. Several families will be attending the opening this Saturday. Your son was recommended by his school because of his love for science. We would be honored if you both could join us." I hesitated. "Will Mr. Bennett be there?" "Yes," she answered honestly. But he specifically asked that no guest should ever feel obligated to attend because of him. That answer somehow made me smile. Saturday morning arrived with clear skies and cool autumn air. Ethan could hardly contain his excitement as we entered the newly renovated community center. Shelves overflowed with colorful books, microscopes filled one corner of the science room, and children eagerly gathered around tables covered with model rockets and engineering kits. Lucas stood quietly near the entrance wearing dark jeans, a navy sweater, and a light jacket instead of one of his tailored suits. Without the formal clothing, he looked surprisingly approachable. The intricate tattoos along his neck remained visible, but they no longer felt intimidating. They simply looked like part of the man Ethan already admired. The moment Ethan spotted him, he waved enthusiastically. "Mr. Bennett." Lucas smiled immediately. "Happy to see you again, birthday champion." Ethan laughed and hurried over before stopping just short of him. "Mom says I should always ask before hugging someone." Lucas glanced toward me. I nodded gently. Only then did he kneel down, open one arm, and allow Ethan to give him a quick, joyful hug. The simple moment warmed something inside me that I had not realized had been lonely for a very long time. Throughout the afternoon, Lucas never tried to become the center of attention. He listened patiently as children explained their inventions, applauded every tiny success, and spent nearly half an hour helping Ethan assemble a small wooden bridge without ever taking over the project himself. "You build it," he encouraged. "I will only hold the pieces when you need another pair of hands." Watching them together, I realized Lucas possessed something far rarer than influence. He possessed patience. Later, while Ethan proudly demonstrated his completed bridge to another group of children, Lucas and I stood beside the courtyard garden where golden leaves drifted softly across the stone walkway. "Thank you," I said quietly. "Not for the restaurant. For this." Lucas followed my gaze toward the children, laughing together. "Every child deserves one place where they never have to wonder if they belong." I looked at him for a long moment. "You always seem to know exactly what to say." He smiled faintly. "Only because someone taught me that kindness is remembered much longer than success." Before I could ask what he meant, Ethan came running back, carrying a small ribbon awarded for creativity. Without thinking, he reached for my left hand and Lucas's right hand at the same time. "Come on," he laughed. "They're taking a group picture." Lucas looked toward me, silently asking permission before allowing Ethan to pull him forward. I answered with a quiet smile. As the camera captured dozens of happy families standing together beneath the bright autumn sun, I realized ours no longer felt quite as incomplete as it once had. The smallest kindness is often remembered long after the grandest success has been forgotten. A few days after the community center event, Ethan came home from school carrying a folded sheet of construction paper covered with colorful drawings. "Mom," he said proudly, "we had to write about our hero." I smiled as I opened the page, expecting to see an astronaut or a firefighter. Instead, Ethan had drawn 3 people standing beneath a bright yellow sun. One was me. One was himself. The third figure wore a dark jacket with colorful markings around the neck. "That is Mr. Bennett," Ethan explained. "He makes people feel important." I looked at the picture for a long moment without saying anything. Children have an extraordinary way of seeing what adults overlook. They remember how someone makes them feel far more than what someone owns. Later that afternoon, I stopped by the community center to return a library book Ethan had accidentally brought home. The receptionist smiled warmly before handing me a small storage box that had recently been discovered during renovations. "These belong to old volunteer records," she explained. "Mr. Bennett asked us to organize everything. Perhaps you could help identify some of the people in this." Photographs. Curious, I carried the box into the reading room and began sorting through faded folders and worn photographs from community events held many years earlier. Then one picture caught my attention. My hands froze. The photograph showed a rainy evening nearly 9 years ago outside a neighborhood soup kitchen. I recognized my younger self immediately. My hair had been much longer then, and I was wearing an oversized yellow raincoat while holding a large black umbrella. Standing beside me was a young man whose clothes were soaked from the storm. His head was lowered, and a scarf covered much of his neck, hiding most of the tattoos I now knew so well. I remembered that night. The shelter had run out of space because of the heavy rain. I had shared my umbrella, bought him a bowl of hot soup from a nearby diner, and insisted he take the dry scarf I had been carrying for my father. At the time, I believed he was simply another exhausted stranger trying to make it through a difficult season. I never even learned his name. My heart began beating faster. Before I could gather my thoughts, a familiar voice spoke softly behind me. I wondered if he would ever find that photograph. I turned slowly. Lucas stood quietly near the doorway with his hands resting inside the pockets of his overcoat. He looked at the picture before meeting my eyes. "It was you," I whispered. He nodded once. "Yes." I struggled to remember every detail of that rainy evening. "You never told me." Lucas smiled gently. "Because I never wanted gratitude to become the reason we grew close." I looked down at the faded photograph again. I had completely forgotten. "I never did," he answered. "That night, you offered warmth to someone you believed could give you nothing in return. You reminded me that kindness is most meaningful when no one expects recognition." Tears filled my eyes before I could stop them. For years I had believed my life was ordinary, filled only with work, sacrifice, and raising Ethan. I never imagined one forgotten act of compassion had remained alive inside another person's heart for almost a decade. Lucas stepped a little closer, but still left enough space for me to choose the distance between us. "Grace," he said quietly, "the evening at the restaurant was not the beginning of our story. It was simply the moment fate gave me the chance to thank the woman I had never forgotten. I looked at the photograph one final time before carefully slipping it back into its protective sleeve. Suddenly, every unexpected meeting, every patient gesture, and every quiet act of respect made perfect sense. Some promises are never spoken aloud. They are carried silently until life finally brings two paths together again. The heart always knows the difference between someone who rescues you for a moment and someone who quietly chooses you every day. I left the community center with the old photograph carefully tucked inside my purse, but the image stayed in my thoughts long after the building disappeared behind me. For years, I had believed that rainy evening had been nothing more than a forgotten act of kindness. Now I understood that one simple decision had quietly connected two lives long before either of us realized it. The following Saturday, Lucas called for the first time. His voice was as calm as ever. "Grace, if you already have plans, please say no without hesitation." I smiled before answering. "What did you have in mind?" "The annual science fair at Riverside Park. Ethan mentioned he wanted to see the robotics exhibition." I looked toward my son, who was building another model bridge across the living room floor. "I think someone would be very disappointed if we missed that." Ethan practically jumped when I told him where we were going. By late morning, the park was alive with families, food trucks, music, and colorful tents displaying inventions created by students and local engineers. Lucas arrived wearing a simple navy jacket, dark jeans, and comfortable sneakers. Without the formal suits, expensive watches, and long line of assistants, he blended naturally into the crowd. Only the intricate tattoos along his neck hinted that he belonged to a very different world. Ethan immediately ran toward him, stopping politely just before reaching him. "Good morning, Mr. Bennett." Lucas smiled. "Good morning, future engineer." They spent nearly an hour exploring every science exhibit together. Lucas never rushed Ethan from one display to another. Instead, he listened carefully to every question, encouraged every curious observation, and celebrated each small discovery as though it were extraordinary. Watching them laugh together felt so effortless that I almost forgot how unusual this friendship should have seemed. Later that afternoon, we sat beneath a large oak tree while Ethan proudly assembled a small solar-powered car he had received during one of the workshops. Lucas watched him quietly before turning toward me. "He has your determination." I laughed softly. He also inherited my habit of asking 1,000 questions. "Never stop encouraging that," Lucas replied. "Curiosity builds better futures than fear ever can." His words settled gently into the peaceful silence between us. For several moments, neither of us spoke. We simply watched Ethan chase his little solar car across the grass while the autumn breeze carried laughter through the park. Finally, I looked at Lucas. "You told me the restaurant was not about repaying an old kindness." He nodded. "It was not." "Then why did you continue coming back?" He took a slow breath before answering. "Because every time I saw you with Ethan, I realized you had never changed. Success never made you kinder, and hardship never made you bitter. That is rare." I felt my eyes fill with emotion. I spent years believing my life was too ordinary for anyone to notice. Lucas smiled gently. "Grace, ordinary people do not change another person's life with nothing more than an umbrella, a warm meal, and simple compassion. You did." Before I could respond, Ethan came running back with a bright blue ribbon he had won for completing the engineering challenge. Without thinking, he wrapped one arm around me and the other around Lucas. We both laughed as he squeezed us together. "Best team ever," he declared proudly. Lucas looked at me, silently asking a question he did not yet put into words. Instead of answering with a speech, I reached for his hand. Our fingers intertwined naturally, without hesitation or uncertainty. It was not a promise made out of gratitude. It was a choice made from trust. Lucas gently lifted my hand and placed a soft, respectful kiss across my knuckles before smiling with quiet warmth. At that exact moment, Ethan looked back at us with the biggest grin I had ever seen. Somehow, without anyone announcing it, the three of us had already begun to feel like a family finding its way home together. The most valuable seat at any table is the one where you're loved exactly as you are. One year passed more quickly than I ever imagined. Autumn returned with its crisp morning air and golden leaves dancing across the sidewalks, bringing back memories of the birthday that had changed our lives forever. This time, however, everything felt different. Ethan was no longer the little boy who wondered whether he belonged inside a beautiful restaurant. He walked with quiet confidence, carrying the same kindness that had always lived in his heart. Lucas had never tried to replace anyone from our past. Instead, day after day, he had earned a place in our future through patience, honesty, and countless ordinary moments that slowly became extraordinary. On Ethan's 9th birthday, Lucas asked if we could celebrate at Brighton House once again. I paused for a moment before smiling. I think it is time. When we arrived that evening, the restaurant looked just as elegant as I remembered, but the atmosphere felt entirely different. The manager greeted us at the entrance with sincere warmth. "Welcome back, Ms. Parker. Happy birthday, Ethan." There was no hesitation in his voice this time. No judgment hidden behind polite words. Only genuine respect. As we walked toward the familiar window table, I noticed something that made me quietly smile. A framed photograph from one of the community center charity events now hung near the entrance. It showed volunteers serving meals with joyful expressions, reminding every guest that kindness belonged inside this restaurant just as much as fine dining did. During dinner, Ethan laughed more than I had ever heard before. He excitedly described his latest science project while Lucas listened with complete attention, asking thoughtful questions and celebrating every accomplishment as though it were the greatest achievement in the world. Watching the two of them together filled my heart with a peace I had searched for during so many difficult years. After dessert, the lights softened, and a small birthday cake was placed before Ethan once again. This time, he closed his eyes before blowing out the candles. "What did you wish for?" I asked. He opened his eyes and smiled. "I already have it." My heart nearly overflowed. As the evening came to an end, Lucas reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and removed a small velvet box. He looked at Ethan first. "May I ask your mother an important question?" Ethan grinned so widely that I could not help laughing. "You have my permission." Lucas turned toward me with the same quiet sincerity that had first earned my trust. "Grace, every beautiful part of my life began the moment you chose kindness without expecting anything in return. You taught me that real strength protects, listens, and stays. Would you allow me the honor of loving you and Ethan as my family for the rest of my life?" Tears filled my eyes before I could answer. "Yes," I whispered. "With all my heart, yes." Lucas gently placed the simple platinum ring on my finger before leaning forward and sharing a soft, tender kiss with me, one filled not with excitement alone, but with gratitude, respect, and the promise of tomorrow. Ethan wrapped his arms around both of us, laughing as he declared, "Now we are officially the best team ever." The entire restaurant applauded, but the sound faded into the background because the only voices I truly heard were the two people who had become my home. As we walked outside beneath the quiet evening sky, Lucas took my hand while Ethan happily walked between us, holding both of ours. Looking back, I finally understood that the greatest miracle had never been that one powerful man reserved every table in a restaurant. The real miracle was that he reserved a place in his heart for a struggling mother and her little boy, and together we discovered that the finest table in the world will always be the one where kindness, dignity, and unconditional love are shared together.